lot of screens open on my box, so struggling a little bit. Hold on. Okay, the recording is on. Share my screen. Anyone can tell me what we did yesterday? What topic did we speak about yesterday? And give some description. Anyone?
So it was about concurrent computing and concurrent computing, fast computing.
Right. So basically your unit 3 has got 3 topics: concurrent computing, task computing, and data intensive computing. So all these 3 topics, they come under the bracket of parallel computing. So yesterday we kind of had a glimpse of how parallel computing is done at the software level and at the hardware level. So today we are going to dig deeper into the knowledge of parallel computing. So we'll continue forward with that. So can anyone tell me uh, like how parallel computing can be achieved, like any technique that we discussed yesterday? How parallel computing was achieved? Okay, no one. Let's so this is my
So it's using parallel software architecture and parallel hardware architecture.
right, but when we spoke about parallel hardware architecture, um, how it was possible to do parallel computing? What was the explain?
Using memory and
No, not memory. Mem How parallel computings are achieved on hardwares? Yeah, breaking down the problem is right, and but on the hardware level, the closest answer is multi-processor, right? So you have multiple processors running inside your system, and that's how you can do. A processor is basically something that is executing the machine instructions. Ultimately, how many machine instructions can be executed in one single time, it depends on the number of processors. If there are 2 processors, means 2 instructions can be executed in the same time, and that's why our computer will work 2 times faster. It will like twice the time it will work. So where it was supposed to execute 100 instructions, now it can execute 200 instructions. So if it is a dual core, you have a so we spoke about cores, right? So inside the processor we have got cores. So this is very important. So core is your actual processor. Okay, so your multi-core is also your multi-processing unit. Even in the single core processor, if you have for more than one core, you can do parallel computing. So the core technology is what this modern architectures are built upon. So uh, multiple cores within a processor is what we spoke about yesterday. So today we'll dig little deeper, and so is my screen visible? Everyone can see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So so before we we'll get into parallel computing. Let us understand how our normal computers are made up of, right? You can say computer, high level computer architecture. Okay, computer, not a computer architecture. Plus, we are looking specifically at processor architecture. So between yesterday and today, there were a lot of points which I came across, and so a lot of points are not there in the presentation. So there's going to be some points which is going to be new during this session, and but I had to figure out a way to explain how things are. It gets a little complicated as we go deeper and deeper. It becomes complicated even for me. Okay, so. So when you have your computer, what do you usually see? You see a monitor, like your screen, right? That is what normally when you have a laptop or something, you will have a keyboard which is either attached. You may have a mouse input. You may have a printer input, right? And you may have your USB input. These are all peripheral devices we see, right? Which are connected to your system. So all this is connected to your computer through some port, or some hardware port. You are plugged in your monitor, you plugged in your keyboard, you plugged in your mouse, you plugged in your printer, you plugged in your USB. So this is your computer, right? Then inside the computer, what are the main units that we have? So we have the very central piece, which is called a processor. And so processor we have, then we have RAM, right? Random access memory. And we have hard disk. So I'm going a little slow now, because even I am trying to formulate how to explain you all this. So most of this is not there in the presentation, so, and I need to start from the beginning. That's why I had to explain these basic things. Okay, so if you do not know, then it is good that at least you will be aware how computer is made up of. So this is what your computer will look like. Okay, your processor is connected to the memory, will be connected to the hard disk. Now your processor is the main piece in the entire puzzle. Nothing will operate without a processor. So processor can execute what? Machine instructions. So I'll write it down over here down. processor's duty is to execute machine instruction. We have explained what is a machine instruction, right? A program consists of machine instructions. Every program is converted ultimately into machine instructions, maybe 10 instructions, 100 instructions, 1000 instruction. Your one line of code can be converted to 10 lines of machine instructions. So your processor's duty is to execute instructions. When you look at these machine instructions, these are nothing but, you can say, a mathematical operations, something like add, multiply, or branch out to a different instruction, store. Store means save it in some register. So at a very minimal level, machine instruction is doing nothing but doing mathematical operations. So your entire software is your mathematics representation in terms of zeros and ones. So when we have decimal numbers, we have a base of 10, right? 0 to 9, and then we have 10. In binary, we have 0, 1, which is a base of 2. So we calculate everything with a base of 2 inside your computer, and that's how your computer works. It works based on these maths. Without these mathematical operations, these mathematical operations are performed by hardware circuits. Yeah, somebody is my audio is not clear. Somebody's audio is on, please. I don't know. Is everybody having a problem? Anybody else having a problem? I really don't know what is the problem. Okay, maybe let me just disconnect my audio and get back. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. So can you hear me now? Is it clear? I have switched off the fan. I think the fan noise was coming. Am I audible? Hello? Hello? Oh, hello, can you hear me? Am I audible now? I have switched off the fan. Okay. So I just switched off my fan there, that's it. Great. So I hope I was not on mute all this time. Okay. So computer is, as we said, is consisting of the peripherals. It's got a RAM, it's got a hard disk, it's got a processor, and the processor's duty is to execute machine instructions. So the machine instructions are very simple, like add, multiply, branch, store. It is these instructions are carried out by circuits. Okay. Now in the processor, some things you'll find is your control unit, right? So let's draw the control unit. Then you'll have your arithmetic logic unit. This is where your mathematical calculations are done. So logical unit means your AND condition, NOT condition, OR condition that you use inside your computer, inside your programs. Those are logical operations. Arithmetic operation is addition and multiplication. Right? Then you will have registers. So registers are like your local memory. Okay, so in case let's say you want to add A and B, so you have to store A and B inside your register. You don't have, if you're initially it may be in the memory, but from the memory it has to be brought into the register, and then here the operations will be done with regards to registers and given back to the memory. Okay, so the control unit is a main unit which is kind of coordinating everything, okay, to pull data from the register, to have arithmetic logical unit, you know, to do some addition, to do some logical operation. And what you may also have is caches. So cache, you can say it is a little, it is not a very big memory, but it is still a memory where you are keeping the data in store, you know. If registers are not, if your registers are not enough to store your data, you can store it in your cache for the time being. Right, so your control unit is the main master over here, and yeah, we missed one very important piece. Hold on. We missed a very important piece, that is your core. Core is your place, the fellow who is actually executing your instructions. So again, the control unit is managing. So I'm going a little slow, so be patient. But this is what you need to understand, you know, how things are made up of. So a core can execute one instruction at a time. So if I have a program, right? So my program, I have something like this, where A semicolon, where B is equal to 2 semicolon. So let's assume A is equal to 3. Then I'll say where variable C semicolon, C is equal to A plus B plus 4. So remember there are so C is equal to A plus B plus 4. So now here, how many instructions you can see? You can see A is equal to 3, right? B is equal to 2, a variable called C, and in this there are two operations actually, A plus B and the result of B plus 4. So this C is equal to, and then store it into C. So when you convert these instructions, this is like, so this will become store A, you know, in your machine instruction, something like this. Your variable B will become store B inside your memory. Your variable C will become store C, right? Then you will have an instruction add A plus A comma B, something like this, okay, and then store the value of A and B in register 1, right? Then add register 1 and 4, right? Then after you add register 1 and 4, you store in C. So you see the 4 lines of code, it is converted into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of machine instructions. So at a time, how many instructions can be executed by code? One instruction, which means, so there is yesterday I mentioned about a very important thing that is inside your computer, who is controlling, is like a traffic master. And who's a traffic master? Is your clock, right? So this clock is basically ticking at some frequency. Usually our clocks, they tick at a speed of you can say 1 second, right? Every second the clock will tick. But in computer, the clock ticks at a very higher frequency level. It can your computers usually are like 2 gigahertz per second, means it can tick that many times per second. It does not tick every second, but inside a second there is milliseconds. So I'll write it down over here. 1 second is equal to 1000 millisecond. Then 1 second, we can also break it down to nanoseconds, 9 zeros. So your clock is ticking at a very high speed in 1 second, and at every tick, every time it ticks, you are in a position to execute. Every tick will execute one instruction. So your clock is like telling, okay, now you go ahead, now you go ahead, now the next instruction go ahead, okay, now the next instruction, now the next instruction. It keeps on ticking. So based on this ticking, everybody is coordinating. So everybody is saying on the next tick, the control unit will do something, on the next tick arithmetic logical unit will do something, on the next tick core will do something, on the next tick memory will do something, on the next tick everybody in the computer is going to do something. So this clock is very important. Without this clock, there is no synchronization. Okay, so this is one important piece inside your computer. So 7 lines of machine instructions will take 7 clock cycles. Okay, so one clock cycle is equal to 1 tick. So keep this architecture in mind, okay? Whenever we have a processor, it is the core is not the only piece. Core is just executing the instruction. But when you are doing, let's say, arithmetic operations, you require the ALU. Your ALU is the one of the important pieces. Did somebody join in? Okay. Your ALU is one of the important pieces. So can I go with another diagram? So now once you understand this parallel, we then tend to think how we can execute faster, right? Right now we are able to do how fast we can execute. We can execute at a speed of 1 clock cycle with 1 instruction at a time. How do we make these 2 instructions? How do we make 4 instructions? All these techniques then comes into place. How do we make the computer faster? How do we make the application faster? Okay, so let's dive little bit into that. So I'm going to now remove lot of pieces. Okay, So in fact, let me remove everything. So let's get inside the processor now. So this is our processor. We are talking only about the processor part of the computer, okay now. So remember this. So in the processor we said there is a arithmetic logic unit, it is called ALU. Then we said we have a core. Now core can execute one instruction at a time. So definitely if you have a dual core system, right? So we have dual core, let's say we have quad core. So now you can execute how many instructions? 4 instructions. We have already mentioned this. The more the number of cores, so 4 instructions can be executed in how many clock cycles? In a single clock cycle, in a single tick itself. So your program will had 7 instructions earlier, right? In that program that example we gave. So that 7 instructions can be executed in 2 clock cycles. So the computer is working faster. So this is one technique of having multiple processors. So let us assume this is what it is. This time we will increase the ALUs. Right? So we have 2 ALUs, or let's say that way. So just remember everything is connected, okay? So the ALUs is definitely will be connected to the core. Now what does ALU does? ALU does arithmetic operations, and what we had an example in the arithmetic operation, A is equal to B. So let us assume we have something known as C plus 4. Now this instruction can be broken down in parallel, into 2 different instruction. First we can add first time we can add A and B and C and 4, and then the result of this we can finally add to get the result value, right? So even though you have a single core, your ALU may be in a position to do some operations on its own while the core is executing one instruction. So the core, it gets A and B, it gives it to the ALU. It gets C plus 4, it gives it to the ALU. So now 2 instructions can be executed per clock cycle. And since both the ALUs are dependent on the single core, there is going to be some coordination to be done, because ultimately the result of A plus B and C plus 4 both have to be brought together and added. So there is going to be some coordination done by the core and the operating system and the processor control unit. Something is going to be done, that they have to make sure that they are adding this properly, so but the thing is, increasing the number of ALUs is also one way of improving the performance of the computer. because that is also where we are doing parallel computing. It is not only the cores but the ALUs also. So the ALUs also matters. And then let's so we have your ALU over here, right? Then we have a core over here, and we have a cache memory over here. So this may be core 1, and you may have 2 cores. So cache memory also enhances your performance. So whatever is common, right? Cache memory can store, this fellow can be responsible for a plus b. This fellow will be responsible for c plus 4. Now both the instructions are interdependent on each other, and ultimately they have to be added. So your cache can, you don't have to go to your RAM memory all the time. This is an expensive operation. Every time if you have to go to the RAM, you have to go to the control unit. So inside the so this is an expensive operation, not cache memory, but core to RAM is an expensive operation. But this operation, if the cores are directly accessing the cache memory within the their own cache memory, then the data is stored over here, inside the so your data is stored over here. Let me see if I can do a thicker line. So your data is over here. So the data is not over in the RAM. This reading from the internal cache memory is easier. And if the cache memory is shared with the multiple cores, then the operations are more faster. So sometimes when the problem is broken down into problem, but they share the same data, you are running the same program, means all the variables that you define in the program is shared with that program, right? So all those data can be put up in the cache memory, which can be accessed by the cores. It doesn't have to go to the RAM. So by not going to the RAM, we are improving the performance of the computer. So you see there are a lot of things that are done at the processor level to make sure things happens faster. Okay. Okay. Things are going so slow. Hold on. Okay. So far we have spoken about processor and one, we have spoken about one instruction that needs to be executed by your core processor, by your core. Okay. And when you say the processor is the core is also called a processor in your when you create a virtual machine, it is also called vCPU. You are never assigned the entire processor. Usually what you are given is the cores. Okay, but we at any given time we were talking about one instruction at a time. But how is this instruction, what all happens when you have to execute the instructions? So you have to understand, first there are 5 operations that happen with any instruction. 5 operations that happen with any machine instruction. The first operation is you get the instruction. If you have to execute the instruction, first you have to fetch it, right? So you have to fetch the instruction. So this is like fetching. Then you have to decode the instruction. Okay. I don't know whether I should go off my. Hold on. Are you able to hear me? I'm speaking through the speakers now. I can't. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear
I'm
you.
speaking through the speakers. Is it better or should I go back to the original version? Okay. So let us, I'll use the speaker only. I have removed my headphone. I can't hear you, huh? You have to type it, type anything that you want to type. Okay. So let us, if there's problem, just yell out so that I can hear you, okay? Okay, no problem. So I've removed the Bluetooth and hopefully this will resolve your problem a little bit. Okay, so there are 5 operations which any machine instructions has to go through. So you can say steps. So decode is basically you have to know what operation you have to do, right? If you have to do a mathematical operation, then definitely the arithmetic logic unit will do it. So you have to give the instruction to arithmetic logic unit, and you have to know which registers to use, how many registers to use, and then finally execute the instruction. So decode is like a plan that you are going to make on executing the instruction, and execute is your actual execution of the instruction. Then store and save. So store is like, you're storing it in the memory and saving it in the register. So there are two things, right? We spoke about registers and memory. So memory is your RAM. Ultimately the program will not read your registers. The program will read the memory, but the CPU has to store it in the register. So these are the 5 things that is happening in any machine instruction. So ideally one instruction will not take 1 clock cycle, it will take 5 clock cycles. So earlier we said it will take 1 clock cycle, right? But that is not true. You actually, one instructions take 5 clock cycles because it has to do all these operations. It has to get the instruction, it has to decode the instruction, it has to execute the instruction, store and save. It is sequential. So let us say instruction 1 is coming in. So you have to execute instruction, let's say A plus B. So how this will happen? First what will happen? First your fetching will happen, right? First you have to fetch the instruction. Then after that, decode the instruction. Second clock cycle. Then execute, third clock cycle. 3 clock cycles have already gone and yet now we have not finished with the instruction, right? Then we have stored, 4th clock cycle. And finally we have save, which is 5th clock cycle. Only after you have finished all these steps, I can possibly think of next instruction. Without that, no, I cannot think. So this is happening in a pure sequential manner. Now out of this, it is quite possible the core is doing only this much. Okay, everything else is done by all the other circuits inside your computer. So the core is doing only execute. So the core is actually taking only one clock cycle, but because of this process 5 clock cycles are going. So that is where parallel technique is used, which is called pipelining. So in pipelining, let us assume there are two instructions, instruction A plus B and instruction C plus 4. So what is the first step that is going to happen? You're going to have, you cannot execute both at the same time, right? You cannot fetch both at the same time. So you're going to fetch first A plus B. Oops, this is like long. Okay. Once you are done with fetch, what are you going to do? You are going to, I'm just going to type now. Move to the next clock cycle. Right? So this is your clock cycle 1, clock cycle 2. Now when clock cycle 2 is happening, this is done by different circuits. Okay, there are, think of this like 5 different circuits are doing 5 different things. One is doing fetching, one is doing decoding, one is doing executing, one is doing storing, and one is doing saving. When the decode circuit is working, the fetch circuit is free, right? So when the fetch circuit is free, I can execute fetch for the second instruction, which is going to happen in the second clock cycle, right? Once this decode is done, it will move to the execute in the third clock cycle. I hope you are understanding, because it is getting little complicated little and little as we go deeper and deeper. So in your third clock cycle, decode execute will happen for the first instruction, but your fetch circuit is free now, right? And your decode circuit is free. So in your third clock cycle, this fellow can come here, right? And he can execute in the third clock cycle. He is free. That's why you can make him use the decode circuit. So now what is happening? How much time do you think will it take for 2 instructions to execute at the same time? Definitely you're going to save time, right? So this architecture, this type of processors, you have to have this kind of processor, which is called pipeline processor. A pipeline processor is a processor where different steps of the instructions can be executed by different set of instructions. It doesn't have to be the same instruction. The circuits are created in such a way where the 5 at any given time all the circuits are busy. So if you keep all these circuits busy, this fellow must be doing processing instruction 1, this fellow must be doing instruction 2, this fellow must be doing instruction 3, this fellow must be working on instruction 4, this fellow must be working on instruction 5. So at a given time you can in one clock cycle you are doing 5 operations. So you are reducing the time by from 5 clock cycles to 1 clock cycle, right? So there is going to be some efficiency because of the way the technique you are using to execute. So this is what is called pipeline processing. Then super scaling processing is equal to pipeline processing plus multiple ALUs. So do you remember I told you how efficiency is increased because we have multiple ALUs but single core. So in this pipeline also we may have a single core but we have multiple ALUs. So this type of process, I mean, if you have multiple ALUs, means you can do two calculations at the same time, which means over here at this phase I can do A plus B and I can do C plus 4, two instructions at the same time. So again you are improving the performance of the computer, because at a core level the two ALUs, you have given two ALUs to the core. There is not only one ALU but two ALUs. So that means I can do two calculations at a time. So there can be two instructions executed simultaneously because of this. So two instructions, there can be two fetch instructions, there can be two decode instructions, there can be two execute instructions, two store instructions, two save, because of this kind of architecture. So again you are executing more instructions in a lesser time using a little complex architecture, where superscaling processing is equal to pipeline processing. Means it is definitely going to use this technique, plus it is going to give more power to the processor by giving more ALUs. Okay, is everything going okay? Everybody is able to hear me, right? Can somebody confirm everything? You can hear me properly? Hello? Okay. Thank you, Goody. Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you, Rishabh. Okay, great. So I will move forward now. So far we have been speaking about parallel computing at a hardware level. Okay, by naturally, without even writing your software, your hardware itself is designed to do parallel computing. So we will look more into hardware computing architectures, but let us now understand. I'm just thinking whether I should continue with the hardware level or software level also. Maybe the software level I can introduce a little bit now. So remember this is at the hardware level, okay? Parallel computing at the hardware level, how we are improvising. So even if you write any pieces of software, your hardware is designed for parallel computing. Even if there is a single core, even a single core can be faster because of all these techniques. Now let us move to understand maybe what is the time. Okay, so let us save this as a different file first. Okay. So what is happening in the software level? So software level, any software that we need to run, it requires an operating system. Actually, operating system gives all the instructions to the hardware. Ultimately the hardware executes it, and operating system can tell how the instruction should be executed, like and how many cores should be used, and all those instructions can be given by operating system. So all our applications are stored on operating systems, right? Your applications are nothing but processes. A process. And a process, every process we have a single thread attached to it. So what do we mean by this? So let's say we have an application, a Java program, right? This is my program, hello world dot Java. So here I have my main function. I'm doing something, and here I'm calling my feed function. I'm saying feed 100 people. So I'm feeding food, so that function will feed food. And then I have a function called feed over here. I'll say for I equal to 1 to 100, serve food. So this is your program. Now remember, this is your software program, okay? Whenever you create your software program, this maps to one process. But at a operating system level, operating system manages threads. So every process will start one thread. So every process will start one thread, at least one thread. And what this thread will do? This thread's responsibility is to execute a single flow of instructions. There will be a start status when the thread will start. There is going to be a stop status when the thread is going to stop, which means when your application will stop. But there will be a constant execution of a single flow of instructions. So when you create a process over here, what happens is in your memory, let us assume, first of all, this program has to be stored in the memory. That is the first task. You cannot execute your program while it is in your hard disk, right? It has to be first loaded into the memory. So this is your RAM memory, okay? So all these instructions is going to be converted to machine level instructions, and it is going to be loaded over here. So definitely you're going to have your main over here, then you're going to have feed over here, then somewhere you're going to have feed function, right? Feed, after feed you may have for loop over here, and then you will have serve food, something like this. We don't have to worry about how basically everything is going to convert into machine instructions and going to be loaded in the memory. That is what you need to know. This piece has to go in the memory. The moment it goes in the memory, it goes like a process, right? So now any process, now this is one process, okay, in the memory. Remember this is not one full memory, this is one process we are talking about. Any process will have two parts. One is your code, which is your program, plus it will have your data part. Any process. So in this, your code is what? Your code is main, feed, for, and serve food. So this is your code part. And the second part also will be created is your data part, because your code is meaningless without data, right? So what is going to be stored here? The 100 is going to be stored here, the value of I is going to be stored here. So you see we are using I value. If we are using A and B, for example, let's assume we have where A comma B, we are using two variables. Okay, we are using two variables, so A is going to be stored over here and B is going to be stored over here. Your code constantly keeps working in tandem with the data, it doesn't work separately. Okay, both of these, so you have to allocate a data storage and a code storage. So that is what your process will this. What is the thread responsible for? The thread is responsible for executing a single flow of execution, which means it starts over here. Sorry, your instructions will start from here and it will go right one after the other, it will be executing. My line is little crooked, but I'm just, maybe I'll just draw here. Your code of here is a single flow of instructions. So your thread has to execute this, but your thread is also made up of code and data. Since one process, and there is only one process, and one process will always have one thread. Okay, one process will always, the process begins with the thread, begins by creating the thread, starting the thread, right? So the process will always begin how? By first creating the thread, starting the thread, and then the thread will take over, will execute the flow of instruction, then your thread will stop, and since the process was attached to only one thread, the process also stops. This is how the flow will happen. There is a link between your code data with your process, and the process is linked to thread. So that is how any applications is working inside your system. Your thread has got a series of sequence of instructions which has to be given to the processor, one instruction at a time, and that's how it works. Okay, now that we have understood how one program is working, but operating system is managing many applications, right? It is managing your Word application, Excel application, your Java program. So many programs are running at one given time. So how does operating system manage all this at the same time? Because only one processor can do only one instruction at a time, remember? So how can operating system, but we never feel the computer slow, we feel the Word application is also working fast, we feel the Excel application is also working fast at the same time. So how does the operating system manages that? So let us this has to be, so it does something using multitasking. So again I'm going to type over here. So let's say this is operating system, and we have program 1, my program 1.java example. This is one program, and I have two programs. So imagine these are two different applications. Okay, so this is application 1 and this is application 2. Now two applications has to be executed by the operating system, not one. Earlier we gave an example of one application, but what we know, whenever the application is running, what happens? What is created? A process is created. So definitely there is going to be one process inside your system, and there is, in the same way, there is going to be process 2. So let us assume this is your memory. Now again we have to go back to the memory. Everything is happening in the memory only. So let us assume this is your memory. Okay. In your memory, now you're going to have how many processes? You're going to have two processes. One process over here and maybe second process over here. So this is process 1. So both are residing in the memory only. Okay. Without the memory, nothing will work. And again, this process is mapping to how many threads right now? This process is mapping to thread 1 and this process is mapping thread number 2. This is not two threads, this is thread number 2 I'm saying, not two threads. Both of them are executing one thread at a time only. As I said, every process creates only one thread. This fellow is supposed to execute my program 1.java. So this fellow will have a program section, right? And it will have what? It will have a data section. Sorry. So it will have a code section and it will have its own data section. This is for program, my program 1.java. Similar way, process 2 will have a code section and will have a data section of its own. So now, so far we have not spoken about how many instructions are we executing, right? We are executing only at the processor. So this fellow is a processor over here. He has got one core. So one core and let's say one ALU. So how many instructions he can perform at a given time? At a given time he can perform only one instruction. Yeah, but if he's having a, so let us put in yellow, this diagram is, in if you're not using very complex architecture at the hardware level, this can execute only one instruction. But if it is using pipelining process, if the processor is pipeline processing processor, or if it is a superscalar processor, then we can think of that it can execute more than one instruction at a time at the hardware level. But when it comes operating system, he has a queue of instructions, right? And he has to manage two queues now. One set of instructions will come from here, another set of instructions will come from here. So operating system, what it does is it executes in the first clock cycle, it will give priority to process 1. In the second clock cycle, it will give to process 2. So let us assume this instruction, process 1 instruction is I1, I2. Sorry, I1, I2. Okay, let us assume these are the instructions of process 1, and let us assume the instructions of process 2 is I3 and I4. So what operating system will do, it will do multitasking. It will interleave the instructions, interleaving the machine instructions of different processes is called multitasking. So interleave means you mix with each other something. So first time, so the queue is going to look like something. I1 will go first. The first time the instruction has to be I1 will be given priority, right? And after this, I3 will be given. I3 is part of which process? I3 is part of process 2. Remember this, okay? Then I2 instruction of process 1 will be given preference, and then I4 will be given preference. They are all going in a single queue only, always. Remember this. So right now, because for a processor, it does not understand process 1, process 2. It understands I have to add A plus B. That is my only duty. Which process is giving me that task? I don't care. You know, the operating system will make sure whatever the results are is given back to the appropriate processes. That is the operating system. We are studying a little bit of operating system only here, but it is to understand what multitasking is. Multitasking is not true parallel computing, okay? You're trying to make it feel as if it is happening parallel. So what happens when you execute alternately, you give each process a clock cycle, both the processes will feel, oh, I am moving forward, I am not stopped, I don't have to wait for the other processes. So the Excel application will feel, okay, I am also running in the operating on the machine, and the Word application will feel I am also running on the on my machine. So both of them are given to chance to move forward step by step. Now here it is possible that because of pipeline processor, I1 and I3 may be executed at the same time, possible, and I2 and I4 also at the same time may be executed at the same time. So again, the hardware architecture, even though it is multitasking, your multi-processing architecture is going to make sure that even your multitask is done parallelly. Now how many threads are running at the same time over here? There are 2 threads. When you have multiple threads running in any system, it is called multi-threading. This is what is called multi-threading. Now how multi-threading is managed? It may be managed using multitasking, or it may be managed using multi-processing. We do not know. So it all depends on how your hardware architecture is, how your operating system is managing is, how powerful is your computer, how big is your memory, right? how many processes can run in the given time, how many threads this can it, how many processes it can support, right? So multi-threading can also happen within a single process. So now we are going a little deeper now. So as I said, multi-threading means more than one thread. We definitely know that every process creates one thread, and if there are two applications running, then two processes are running. If you look at task manager, let's see what we can find. CPU. So processes, do I have more details on this? See, these are all applications, okay? So applications mean definitely there is going to be a process. So every process is given an ID. So this is process number 172.0011348. Now you notice there are two processes or created with the two process IDs as part of the one application AnyDesk, but they will be running on different threads, which means one process can run on different threads. I wanted to see options, view, open resource monitor, what it shows over here. So you see there are search UI.exe is running 45 threads, lock app e.exe is running 11 threads. This is one application itself is running multiple threads. So this is another way of improvising. So let us recreate the diagram. So now we are going to dig that into the process itself. So I have an application. This application will create a process because I have a main function. This is my code, right? And then somewhere down I've got a feed function, and let's say before the feed function I've got transport function. I'm transporting the food before I'm feeding the food. Let us say example, two functions. Then I have feed function implemented over here. Some code is going to be here, and then I'm going to have transport function. Okay, so definitely one thread image, as soon as this process is put in the memory, one thread will start. This is thread number 1. Now what I can do, I can tie this feed to, I can spawn a thread or create another thread. I can create a thread and attach it to this function. So what will going to happen? I am going to create another thread which is going to start at this point, and maybe sorry, this is like let us assume transport is the one, the first function is the one which we are spawning. Okay, we spawn a thread over here and we attach it to transport function. What will happen is this thread within this is one thread which is going to run separately. Okay, you're going to have another thread inside the memory. So in the memory, how many processes are you going to see? you're going to see two processes, which is but both the basically these are two threads belonging to the same application. Same application process now has two threads, and let us assume I spawn a thread again over here for the feed function. Spawn means creating a thread, okay? So this is going to spawn. So when this is going to spawn, this fellow is going to start at this point. Let me give it a distance. And may end over here. I don't know where it is going to end. Where it is going, when the thread is going to start and when it is going to end, it all depends on the processor, right? It all depends on which thread got the priority. But from operating system level, what does operating system sees? Operating system is going to see three different processes or threads. So process can have multiple threads, okay? Remember this, a thread is a process and a process can create multiple threads. So operating system is going to see, though this is one process, there are three different threads attached to it. So for the operating system, it is going to see three different processes from its perspective. Each process is going to behave like a separate process. So each process is going to have a code section, and each process is, or each thread is also going to have a data section. So as I said, each process is going to have a code section, and each thread is going to have its own data section allocated to it. So let us copy this much. So this file also is going to have this, and this fellow thread 3 is also going to have this. I need to extend this a little bit. So this is your process, you think, huh? Sorry. This is your process. And there was no need to do this actually. Okay, anyway, that's fine. But the idea is each thread will have its own code and own data. Now what is this data actually? With this data, you must have defined something inside your function, right? Where you must have defined p is equal to 10. And in transport function, you would have defined where q is equal to 10. Q is equal to 78 example. And in main function, you would have defined where a comma b A is equal to 56. So you're going to have A over here stored in this. You're going to have B over here stored in this because it is part of this thread. And you may have, P is your thread 2, right? So this is, okay, so this is, transport is Q, right? So yeah. So this is your transport thread, so which is going to be have Q over here, and here you're going to have P over here because this is a feed thread, feed function. So the value of Q can be seen only by thread 2. Okay, Q is local to thread 2. P, the value of P can only be seen by thread 3. You cannot access value of P from thread 2 because P is in feed function. P cannot be accessed in transport function. These two variables are given different storage area inside the memory by the operating system. But the value of A, it is a parent thread, right? This fellow actually spawned this guy. Thread 1 started this guy. And this fellow also started this guy. So it is quite possible whatever values are defined global, if you make this as a static variable or a global variable, how you declare this sorry, let me just what let me do is, syntax wise this has to be outside if you have to make this global. Okay, that is how it will that if you define it outside the main function, this becomes global. Now the value of A can be accessed by feed and transport over here. It will be given access to it. But for the operating system, now it will multitask. What it will do, it will operating system will multitask between three threads, even though it is part of the same process. So let us assume there is instruction I1 over here, right? Let us assume this is I5. Assume this is I7. Operating system will now, first run I1, then give I5, and then give I7. So how many instructions of the one process was given to the operating system? We fooled the operating system, right? In a way, we said we are not one, we are three people, we are three different people. So you give us the processor time for us. So all the three instructions got the opportunity to be executed by the processor. So in this way, multi-threading, that's why we multi-thread, because we can get preferences, and multi-thread, it operates separately, so you can do it if you have 3 cores, your core 1, core 2 and core 3. Let us assume our hardware is very advanced hardware architecture. We have a 3 cores, so core 1 is there, and core 2 is there, and core 3 is there. A single program can be not only be multitask, but it is also can be multi-process. Sorry, now there are too many lines. So core 1, core 2 and core 3. Now we have to be careful that when when you created 3 different threads, means 3 different parallel threads can be executed parallelly. So what is the danger now? So let us say I am saying A is equal to 78 over here, and I'm saying print A, and I'm saying print A over here. Now the danger is, even though three different threads are running parallelly, for the sake of performance, you are still they're still somewhere dependent on each other because of A. If A value is changed by any function, the other thread function A will be impacted. So when you come to transport, the value of A may be 78. So you never know in multi-threading who is changing what data. So you have to be very careful that the best practice is don't use dependent data. Don't make it depend on each other. If you make the threads dependent on each other, then it can create unexpected result. Now A was 56, suddenly became feed function made A is changed the value of A to 78, and the transport function did not know that you have changed the value to 78. So there can be unexpected result, and that is why they say keep the parallel programs or parallel threads as independent as possible. So you should keep parallel threads independent of each other from any shared data as much as possible. Otherwise you have to look into all these other issues that we spoke about. When you share the data, you make the threads dependent on each other, and that can if one thread is waiting for the value of B which thread 2 is working on, then thread 2 will wait, and all that issues can happen where thread 2, let's say so let's say we are inputting B over here, and in feed function you are printing B. So the feed function print B is, now the thing is, the value of B is inputted in transport function, so it is dependent on transport function. If the transport function does not get over, if the thread 2 function, thread 3 function, this is thread 3, if now thread 2 is printing B, right? But where is the value of B? The value of B is managed by thread 3, input B. So now you have created a kind of a little bit like a deadlock for thread 2. Thread 2 suddenly has to wait for thread 3 to get over. So this dependency is not good, because thread 2 now cannot move forward, even though no matter how good is your parallel hardware architecture, the thread 2 will have to stop. So the thread can not only start and end, terminate, but it can stop and wait, and then wait for the other threads to get over or something. So these are the different states of the thread. The thread, if it goes in the stop state, that means it is occupying the space in the memory. It is waiting. It is not getting over. It is waiting for the other threads to get over. It is dependent on some data on the other thread. So you should always keep threads. Make sure your threads are independent. So you should write your parallel programs in such a way where all the tasks are not dependent on each other, and all the threads are not communicating with each other. Okay, so it is non-dependent and non-communicating. These two features are very important. You will have a question which usually is asked in your exam, which is what is the computation and communication. please talk about this. That way, some questions usually they ask in the exam. It is nothing but when there are two computations happening parallelly inside your system, you should make sure they are not communicating with each other, and that is what the gist of the this whatever this question is. You know, the answer to the question is whenever two parallel processes or two parallel threads or two parallel whatever is running parallel, make sure they are not dependent on each other. Whatever they are computing, let them compute separately, and you make sure they don't depend on, there is no communication between the two process, and that kind of program parallel programs are better. So having NAS, we can continue now. I think on the next lecture. Is there any question for today? Can you hear me? Is everybody there? I think we can stop for the day over here now. And is there any questions? Okay, no questions. Let me recording and take the attendance.